Welcome. If you're a woman who has a sense that there's more out there for you, you're in the right place. I'm Whitney Baker, host of the Electric Ideas podcast. Somewhere along the line of work and kids, life carried on, but I lost track of my truth. I'm on a reflective journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I interview a woman who is lighting her own path and offering others hope. Before our conversation ends, we'll share a reflective question for you to explore. Sometimes all we need is a jolt, a fresh idea, an aha moment that connects us to a sense of possibility. This, my friends, is what I call an electric idea. Welcome back to Electric Ideas. I'm Whitney Baker, and this is a mini jolt, a short episode where I share quick tips and reflections to light you up with a greater sense of what's possible for you and your life. So I know for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, we are shifting into a new autumn season. And while personally I welcome this change and the coolness in the air, this transition can be pretty tricky for some people. For example, today was one of the first days in a while when I woke up and it was still pitch black outside in the morning. Regardless of your feelings toward the new season changes are a perfect time to give yourself a minute to pause and reflect on what you want to call in, and especially in the fall, maybe what you want to release or not repeat. I like what Peggy Wynne Borgen says about this time of transition. She says, though we may be tempted to resist the dying of the light of summer, this new phase is an equally important and necessary part of the life cycle. Like the earth, we need rest in order to rejuvenate. We need to stop and allow life energy to accumulate and build back up. Autumn is the beginning of this vital process. I don't know about you, but in the past week especially, I have definitely felt a strong urge to carve out more time for grounding and resting. And while I, of course, appreciate the sentiment of the quote I just shared, and have been making this time and space to allow myself more guilt-free rest after so many new beginnings in September with activities and school for the kids. I also think some people shy away from self-reflection because they assume it has to be super serious or not fun. That's why I intentionally included fun in the title of this episode, because it's easy to slip into adulting mode and take ourselves too seriously when aiming to live an inspired and connected life. But I believe that play, creativity, laughter, lightness are among the highest expressions of our best selves, and I think there's room for it all. So today I'm going to share 2 fun, easy practices that feel alive for me right now and feel like they are helping me show up for what matters to me this season. Practice 1 is look back to look forward. So even though I talk a lot about dropping in and living in the present moment, I also think it's really important to use the information from lived experiences in the past to help inform our priorities for any given season. So here's something I like to do that you might want to try. When you have a moment of actual downtime, not a hurried, frustrated crack of time waiting in line somewhere, but maybe even in the evening, you make yourself a little cup of tea and try this. Go back to October and November of last year in your photos. I know you've all got all the photos in your phone. If you're like me, try not to let this turn into a stress dive because you've got a million photos and you feel like you never do enough with them. Just let it be fun. Remember what was happening for you at this time last year and see what photos give you an emotional charge. We tend to repeat family outings and recipes and traditions. And sometimes it's wonderful. That's how things become traditions. But on the other hand, sometimes you look back at a photo and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought that would be fun and it was total garbage. So you can go back to these photos and not only see them and use the information, but also see if any of them give you like a really warm, positive feeling or any of them give you a dread feeling or that feeling of, I should do this. So I want to give you a couple examples of how I actually applied this in my own life. When I was going through my photos, I remembered that I let my daughter have her friends over to decorate cupcakes with Halloween stuff, and it was super easy, but also felt super connected and festive. So in some ways, it's like, oh, that's a great idea. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. Let's do that again. I also enjoyed revisiting some memories. We had a trip with close family friends to New York last fall, and we walked the city and we went to the Met and we went to Central Park and we went to a Broadway show with the girls. And while my ability to travel is feeling a little eclipsed at the moment because my husband is getting ready to have surgery for a torn rotator cuff this coming week, send us all the luck. Looking back at these photos from New York reminded me that every fall I always get this kind of craving for culture, like this back to school vibe. So we're not headed back to the Big Apple, but I was like, okay, what can we do? So I sent my husband a couple links for shows that I want to see in the near future near us. I'm also making more space for reading and giving myself permission to read in times that aren't just before bed without the guilt or the shame or feeling like I should be getting something done. I don't want the season to fly by and feel like I was planning stuff for everyone else and didn't actually enjoy anything myself. Of course, I'm going to be thinking of my family and my friends and organizing and supporting things they are into, but there are so many small ways I can intentionally keep myself on the list too. For example, last year we went to this Jack's City pumpkin patch and it felt so soulless and like a weird tween selfie hellhole versus something that actually gave me a sense of true ease and enjoyment of the season. So I'm definitely taking that feedback and not going back there or making that a priority. And back to what I was kind of talking about with it does feel like a transition where some of us are kind of craving a little bit more rest. I want to invite you to honor that, but not confuse slowing down and being intentional with being antisocial in sweatpants at 5 p.m. every day and see you guys next summer energy. You do you, only you know what you need. But I will say that looking back through my photos from late September and October reminded me that gathering is one of my values. I love the quote by Brené Brown. She says, "Connection is why we're here. It gives us purpose and meaning in our lives." So if you've been part of this community for any amount of time, you know that one of the biggest things I talk about is self-care being generous. In my world, deep self-care is not only about listening to your own needs, but taking care of yourself so you can show up more vitally and connect with people when it's time for connection. So as you're looking back at your photos, if there are annual events or ways you celebrate Halloween, things you do, try to remember what actually felt fun and energizing for you versus what felt draining and not worth it for you so that you can curate your life a little bit more. I actually love celebrating Halloween, and it would rub against my authentic nature not to embrace the fun and creativity and silliness of the season. However, I used to be the person who opened up my home to a big Halloween night come and go where anyone could stop in, grab a warm bite and something to drink. Kids could open candy. But I just don't have energy for that anymore. My girls are getting older. They kind of want to trick or treat with their friends. And we know so many of our neighbors. It's fun for me just to chill on the porch and pass out candy and say hi and see all the cute costumes. So knowing that I don't have the energy for a big party, but also wanting to honor myself and remembering through this photo exercise that gathering is really one of my values during this season. Last year I pivoted and I did more of an intimate sit down adult Halloween dinner party with a small group of close friends on a different night than Halloween. And that felt super fun and meaningful for me. And I laughed when I looked back at a bunch of us dressed up as vampires at my dining table last year. So that's something that I decided I definitely want to recreate. Spoiler alert, in case anybody needs some inspo, this year's theme is Down the Dark Rabbit Hole dinner party. And I'm genuinely excited about creating a fun menu that honors the theme and setting a fun table, watch out teacups and black and white checks. So many of these choices about what I'm prioritizing spending my time on this fall are beautifully informed by looking back, going through some pictures, remembering what was great, recreating that if that still feels great, changing it or editing it if the sentiment feels great, but the format just doesn't work for you anymore, or intentionally choosing to let it go and make space for something that actually works for you this season. All right, moving on to practice number 2, which I'm going to call honor your fall loves. This is a practice that was inspired in me based on the work of designer and simplicity advocate Michael Smith, who really brings home the idea of curating your season in a way that feels nourishing. So, similar to the first practice, I encourage you to give yourself a little space, and all you're going to do is create a fall 2024 Pinterest board. And I want you to think about fall through the five senses: touch, taste, sight, smell, sound. There are no hard and fast rules for this, but I want you to think about fall through those five senses and then find a photo on Pinterest that represents that smell or that feeling and just put it in your board. Pinterest is pretty easy to navigate, but if you are not a technology person and this seems like a hassle or a barrier, go old school, get some magazines, and you can collage the vibe that you are craving this fall season. I'm not against a pretty mantle or some spooky decor, but don't let it turn into some weird comparisonitis spiral because you see all these perfect pumpkin desserts. The only thing required is to tap in to your internal wisdom, go through those senses, and figure out what you're craving and what would really feel like fall to you, and then look for patterns. I have to laugh because I did this practice on my own, and I think 70% of the images were some version of a warm drink, cozy candlelight, a blanket, and a book. Guess what? I don't need to go on a 3-day R&R to create that for myself. What I do need is enough self-worth that I can choose to do these things that deeply nourish me, even when there are dirty dishes in the sink and older kids who can do things on their own asking for my help. I get to make the choice to model this deeper form of self-care that I believe in, which is all about genuinely showing up for your own needs. I get to listen to myself and trust that when I show up for my own loves, I will feel fueled and in the long run, be a much better parent, partner, and friend. So just a quick conclusion as we move through fall, I invite you to try out these 2 fun practices to connect with yourself and feel like you're enjoying a more inspired season. The first practice I shared was look back to look forward. Give yourself a relaxed moment to revisit photos from the previous year or two from this time of year. Recall the emotional highlights and events that left you feeling good. Decide what to change or release. Find ways to honor and recreate what energizes you the most about the fall season. You don't have to start from scratch or always recreate the wheel. I don't want to stress anybody out, but we all know, especially the moms in the audience, that once we hit Halloween, we kind of tip into the holiday zone. So if this is a practice you try and enjoy, I encourage you to use the same practice and tool to look back at holidays from the last couple of years and make informed decisions that way. Your second practice is honor your fall loves. This is so easy. Create a simple visual place that you can turn to, whether you're planning your weekend or maybe when you're just feeling a little bit down or funky. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we start to have shorter days and it's not always a super happy transition for everyone. If you do the second practice, you will have a visual catalog of exactly what you love about the season and get to create for yourself. And it gets to be that fun and easy. A side note on this is I feel like sometimes we just super overcomplicate things. And sometimes for me, it's as simple as starting a fire in the fireplace. So when you're working with me, the reflection piece is always going to be a part of it. Oftentimes, we get to keep it lighthearted, like today. I always end my episodes with a chance for reflection. So here's what I have for you as our time comes to a close. I believe that being inspired means being in spirit and deeply connected with yourself. Inspiration for me isn't so much about feeling motivated. It's about connecting with yourself and being honest with yourself and making space in your life to connect with what actually floats your boat without needing to defend or explain that to anyone else. When you intentionally create opportunities for yourself to be in an inspired state, including by revisiting past experiences for information or visually cataloging what you're loving about any season in a given year, you align with your true self. Things flow easier. Life feels more meaningful and on purpose. So ask yourself this: how can I get truly inspired or in the spirit this fall season. Thank you so much for being a part of the Electric Ideas community. If you enjoyed this episode, I have a sincere favor. Would you be willing to copy the link and send it via text to a couple of friends who might also be inspired? Or would you be willing to share a takeaway or something you discovered in Instagram stories and tag me so we can inspire more people? The Electric Ideas podcast continues to be a source of joy and passion for me, but I need your help getting the word out so I can continue to grow and expand. Thanks again for being here. Hope you have an inspired day. I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're looking for more, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman. And if you enjoyed the show, I invite you to support me by leaving a review or sharing it with a friend. Hope you have an inspired day.